I'm going to give a brief overview about the settings view controller. So as I previously mentioned, when I was talking about the general project structure and the home view, so the user can toggle between the home view, which we have covered in the other video, and the settings view. So the settings view, as I explained before, is created programmatically. So if we go inside the main storyboard, we'll see that the view controller inside here is actually empty. So we just have the navigation bar here at the bottom. So let's just quickly have a look again 1 second at the simulator. So it is created programmatically. It has like a header here where we show an image, welcome message, and the email of the user. And then it's divided in 2 sections, which we can easily add other components to this section or an additional section if we want to. So let's just jump into the code and have a quick look. So we do the necessary imports, so Firebase, Research Kit, and WatchKit connectivity. And I will explain why we need all those imports. And so let's start with the session. Okay, so let's actually get the simulator here, which I will explain in detail why all the different parts of the codes. So since at the top here we have the session, what is the session needed? So the session is related to the watch connectivity here, and this is needed to send information from the phone to the watch, and then eventually you could send information back from the watch to the phone. And the reason why we need it is because we have the participant ID from the Firebase authentication, which is like a unique ID for that participant which has logged in. The only issue that we are facing is that we cannot grab, or at least I don't know how to do that, we cannot grab that information and pass it to the watch unless we use WatchKit connectivity. So we cannot call Firebase directly from the watch. So this is what we are doing. We initialize this session here in order to start this communication between the phone and the watch. In particular, we will be getting so when the view, let's cover just the session right now. So when the view loads, we start the session, which is a WC session, we activate it, and then if we go down here, send participant ID, so we check if the session is supported. Okay, if the session is supported, we send a message. The message has to be like of the type of a dictionary, which we have a key, and then we have a message that we actually pass, and this is going to send the message to the phone, to the watch. So later on, I will show you the relative code into the watch iOS app, which actually receive that data and then store it locally. So then later on, we will have that information. So it is a bit of a downside. So when the user joins the study, technically should come here and send the participant ID to the watch. This is another issue because I was not able to get a unique identifier from the watch, because if the watch would have had a unique identifier, then we could have used that as a unique key, because we could associate a watch with a specific user. But that's apparently is not the case. So we have it here in the utilities. This function could also be moved in the home view controller. So every time the home view controller loads this session, try to send this data to the watch. I mean, that could be done as well. So far, I just put it here, and it's an additional step, but at least we know that the watch is on, the phone is on, so we'll ask the participant to do it only at that time. We can, as I said, move it to the home view controller. So as I said before, this view is created actually programmatically. So as you can see here, after initiating the session, we have the table view. So we're going to create the table view. In this case, we're using a table view, which at the end of the day, for the purposes of the Cozie app, it would have been better to use a table view also in the home, while over there I use a collection view. They're very similar, but just slightly different. And so the first thing that we do is we configure the UI just to show what we want to show. And the first function inside configure UI is configure table view. So basically we just tell the row height, session height, and blah blah blah. So this is just a static, and we just render the the top here like this welcome, and so basically we have task view controller. Okay, so just I'm just going send participant ID. Okay, so here is actually where we are getting into the code to just change how the session looks like. Sorry for that, I got a bit lost. So here we have the settings of the view controller. So as we did before in the home view, we return how many sections we have. So in this case, it's done a little bit better because I've implemented a function here, setting section, which contains is quite well organized because it contains a numerator, which are case iterable, int, and custom string convertible. So here we define the setting session. So if we want to add a new session, we just have to add it here. So we have utilities, we have communication, so utilities and communication here, and we define a description. So basically this is the text that will be returned. Inside each section, so inside utilities and communication, then we define which button we want to show. So we have participant, ID watch, send participant, and log out. Okay? And again, here we are returning the text that we want to display in this table. Another thing that I've implemented is this switch. Okay, so at the top here we see that the switch is not implemented, so we return a false here. But at the bottom, for instance, we could add the switch on the notification, which this function has not yet been implemented, and I don't even know if I will. But with this switch, we could toggle between having the notification on, the push notification on, or the push notification off, for instance, if the user doesn't want to be disturbed. Okay, so this makes it quite nice and neat and organized. So if we want to add a new section here, it's a matter of adding a new case. So let's say in the utilities we want to add another one, which is I don't know, play a sound. You just add a case here, and then you define what you want to return in this text here. And then in the other function in the settings, we'll actually define the action that has to be performed, of course, when that table is part of the table is clicked. So let's go back to the settings view. So here we count how many sections there are. In the table view, we define how many utilities there are, so how many items there are inside utilities, and how many items there are inside communication. So again, is all programmatically generated, and it's very easy to add or remove an item. We have the table view here, where we add we define like the layout of the different cell, and we have the height for the footer section. So we define the height, we define the cell. So this is about this is for the setting section, so just these two parts here, and this is instead for okay, so here is what I was actually saying before, is where we define the functions when we actually press, so did select that row. Okay, so just look at this part here, this is cell for row, so this is like about the user interface, something visual. This is actually an action. So did select row at. So first we get the section and we understand whether we clicked in this session or in this session here. And then once we know the session, so we toggle between utilities and communication, then we call a function based on the button that we pressed. So if we press the first button, we do send participant ID, where the function is somewhere, actually above, where I just showed you before. And for instance, if we press logout, we call this logout pressed, and this is the function that we call when we want to log out. So basically that's we are going to actually prompt first a message. So let's press on logout. Okay, so this pop-up message comes out, and this is actually what is inside here. The send consent form is what I just showed you before. So if the user has already completed the consent form, here I can send it back to the principal investigator. So we have covered these two functions. We have covered this table view, which defines what we are going to do when we are going to press a cell in the table or a row in the table. This is the function of the table view again. So all this is related. So this is send participant ID. We covered that before, and this is the sign out function. So yes, we use, as we know, we're using Firebase authentication. So to sign out a user is pretty straightforward. We just have to do authentication.authentication and then sign out. Okay. And if we sign out, we also need to change the view controller. Of course, we don't want to show the settings anymore with all the personal information, but instead we actually want to show the start view controller, which I will cover in another video. And so finally, I just want to show you where is the table header. So inside here, so we have user info header. So all this part here at the top is actually controlled by this Swift file. So we have the profile image. So right now is a static image, which is actually the app icon. Then we have the welcome here message. This could be the name and surname of the user. I didn't do it because eventually we would have to do an additional query to the users table in Firebase. So I didn't implement that. I just wrote welcome. One information that on the other end we have, and we don't have any issue in getting it, is the email. So in the email label, when we first created, we leave it empty, but then eventually we try to get it from the current user. So we have information about from Firebase, since it's authenticated with the email and password, we can actually extract the email address and get it and print it here. Here is just about how we make it, the size and the color and so forth, if it's bold or not. Okay, so I think I've kind of covered the settings view, and I don't think there is much more to add to it.